All right. Now it's after a couple of minutes telling me that we are live. So we're glad for that. Anyway, all right. So we're continuing the Our Father, and we are now in paragraph 2786 down to 2796. And it begins discussing the word our, and you've heard people say that. Recently, we had the chance to host Archbishop Brody at Montgomery Catholic, and one of the questions that one of the non-Catholic students asked Archbishop Brody was, Catholics don't emphasize a personal relationship with Jesus. Of course, the Archbishop said, well, I don't know if I agree with you. We do. In fact, if you are a Catholic, you actually believe, if you go to Mass, that you receive Jesus so much that you actually consume him. Okay, you can't get any more personal and intimate than that. A lot of people don't realize that when they make that charge. But one of the things that the Archbishop said was, look, I think I know what you mean. I don't agree with you, but let me help you understand this. When Jesus taught us to pray, what did he give to us? What words did he give us? He said, he gave us the words, when you pray, pray like this, our Father. He didn't say, my Father. He said, our Father. Now, you have a personal relationship with Jesus. In fact, I hope and pray that you do. He says, but you do not have a personal relationship with Jesus exclusive to others who also have a relationship with Jesus. And we Catholics call those others the church, of which we are the body of Christ. So it is personal and communal. It's both. It's not personal or communal, Archbishop said. It's personal and communal. It's personal and communal. So when Jesus gives us the words our, the catechism, and basically the Archbishop was really just going through the catechism without directly quoting it. In fact, it actually uses this language. Grammatically, and then in quotes it has, grammatically, our qualifies a reality common to more than one person. There's only one God, and he is recognized as Father by those who, through faith in his only Son, are reborn of him by water and spirit. The church is this new communion of God and men. Okay. In praying our Father, each of the baptized is praying this in communion. The company of those who believed were of one heart and soul. So there you have the personal, I believe, Tom really believes, but can I believe apart from you? The catechism would say no. It would be deficient, right? We would be missing something. Because the church as the body of Christ, which our series on the Mass we'll get to coming up probably in the next, well, not this week because we have our penance service, but the following week, the issue of the faith, our faith. Look not upon our sins, but on the faith of your church, right? So there's a sense in which my faith is tied to the faith of who? The church, right? Right? It's not Tom's faith. I don't make the faith. I receive the faith. So it's both and, Archbishop Brody, personal and communal.
Yeah, if I could comment on that. Therein lies the error of Protestant thinking, of which I was guilty once upon a time.
Same here.
Yeah, right. It's the Protestant born-again experience, personal relationship with Jesus, which is the terminology that the Protestant church uses
Right.
constantly. It's an idea that it's just you and Jesus.
Yes.
All right. You're tight with the Lord.
Right.
You had an emotional experience. Most of the time, it is an emotional
Yep.
experience that you've had. I'm saying it's invalid.
No.
I'm not trying to indicate that it's invalid. I'm just saying it usually comes from an emotional experience.
Right.
Where you feel really, where you feel the Lord has spoken to your heart. You really feel it, and you actually start changing your life. So I equivocate that to having a born again experience. But where they go off track, where they leave the Catholics, is just what you said. It's more than just Jesus and you. Because Jesus is his church.
Right.
His church is a body. And you are connected to that body. If you try to disconnect yourself from that body and just go with Jesus because you and him are tight, you have a personal relationship with him, that's where you get into error.
Right.
And that is what a lot of times, by definition, I think the Catholic Church doesn't try to explain that enough to their people.
Yeah.
To us, I'm one of their people.
Right. No, I agree. I think it's a very fair point.
It's a matter of definitions.
Right.
And they don't clarify that enough. And so therefore people are a little confused about it.
Right.
But it's a conversion experience, valid, but it has to be connected with the body.
Right. Exactly. And, just talking about the whole notion of some of our Protestant friends and how they view the relationship with Christ as something me and Jesus, which we don't deny has merit. Of course, Jesus wants to have a relationship with you personally, but it's never merely individually. And I think that's the key thing that we have to keep in mind. For the Catholic, it's both and. It's personal and communal. And in fact, the Catechism, and I love this language, finally, this is what it says, basically just stuff that we had just said, but then 92. Finally, if we pray the Our Father sincerely, we leave individualism behind. We leave individualism behind. Because the love that we receive frees us from it. The hour at the beginning of the Lord's Prayer, like the us of the last four petitions, excludes no one. If we say it truthfully, our divisions and oppositions have to be overcome. And I think that's why the church, before we pray it at Mass, says we dare to say. And I was talking to, Friday night, I was at the fish fry. I was talking to a convert. And one of the things that the convert was saying, and it was quite beautiful, it was very remarkable, actually. He was saying one of the things that led him to become Catholic was when he realized that if you actually read the early Protestants, the earliest Protestants, read them at their word, Luther, Calvin, even Thomas Cranmer in the Anglican Church, they are all bemoaning and concerned by the breakup of Christianity. That's what they say. They say it, their own words. Okay? And that they hold out hope for a reunion. Okay? And of course, for them, it's all one-sided. If the Catholic Church would just get out of her own way, then we'd all get along. We all say we want reconciliation, but you have to make the first move. Well, one of the things that dawned on this person was the fact that the Catholic Church has made a lot of moves of return, of reconciliation. In fact, so much so that John Paul II asked 25 years ago in his encyclical Ut Unum Sint, that they may be one, how, he said, I invite my Protestant brethren to help me answer this question: how can the successor of Peter be a force for unity within Christianity? We're still waiting for a response. And so what dawned on this person who came into the church was Protestantism has become very content to be a self-contained entity within this reality called Christianity. And so the Baptists are content to be the Baptists, and the Presbyterians are content to be the Presbyterians, and the Lutherans are content to be the Lutherans, and these Assemblies of God are content to be the Assemblies of God, and the Episcopalians are content with being Episcopalians, except don't look, but there's how many different Episcopalians out there now? The 8, right, exactly. You lose count. The one right up the road from here is ACNA, which is not to be confused with AMIA, which is not to be confused with ECUSA, which is not to be confused with the Anglican Church. I mean, and I'm not even being hyperbolic there. I'm being serious. It's crazy. Scott Hahn used to say, and this is true I say it now as a former Presbyterian, Presbyterians, we're the split peas. The PCUSA, the PCA, the EPC. They almost sound like they're intelligence agencies with the United States, apparatus, right? There's in many cases, yes. Like very few will actually, like the Church of Christ, and that, hi, Bill, saying hello. They're the one organization or the one denomination that at least tries to say, hey, when Jesus said the church, he means us. And there's basically only a couple of groups in Christianity that do that. The Church of Christ and the Catholic Church. The Presbyterians and all these other groups, they'll say, well, we think we have the best teaching. We're the most faithful. But we recognize that there's more to Christianity than just us. But then, of course, when it comes to ecumenical dialogue, they got it all right. They got it all figured out. Right. And that's why eventually what happens within a lot of our non-Catholic Christian communities is they wind up splitting further and further and further, and they break up. So, for example, as Dr. Kenneth Howell, who works for The Journey Home, if you've ever watched that on EWTN, Dr. Howell is their scholar in residence. 100 years after the Protestant Reformation, 100 years after, so about 1620, there was already in various writings of Protestant leaders about 75 different interpretations of John chapter 6. And John chapter 6 is important because that's the famous, my flesh is real food and my blood is real drink. Seems pretty clear what Jesus is saying there. But from the very beginning, you see this split. So Luther and Calvin and, they agree on this and this, and then you bring them together, what happens? They split even further. Okay? So the key thing to keep in mind here, and to go back to what the convert that I was talking to the other night was saying, he realized how serious could I be as he's Episcopalian. How serious could I be as an Episcopalian to say that I want the church to be one when by all evidence, we're very content being our own thing. We're very content not being one. Does that make sense? And so it dawned on him, and that made him feel that bothered him. And he said, I don't think that's what Jesus wants. And then the next question he asked was, okay, which church can lay claim seriously to being the church? Because it seems obvious to me, he said, that Jesus wants a church. Now the next question is, which one is it? And that's what led him to become Catholic. And it was about a year and a half journey. He's a big history guy, so he knows his history, and in fact, he has his doctorate in history. but that became a very, very important thing for him. So, yes, sir.
And he explained to Orthodox Catholic, Roman Catholic churches.
Oh my, great question that I wished was not asked. So I'm just going to let everybody know. What about the Orthodox and well, okay. Here's what I would say with the Orthodox, and obviously it's a very deep issue. The Catholic Church recognizes the Orthodox Church as a church. That's the first thing that we have to say up front. We recognize, in fact, let me just give you directly Archbishop Brody. We have had over the years at Montgomery Catholic Orthodox students in our school. Okay, and if you know down on Mount Meigs, they have right. Okay, and that's where they went. But if you also know a little bit about the story there, they didn't always have a priest. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they have a service, sometimes they don't. I think now there's more stability there now. That's been. But when they were at our schools some years ago, there wasn't. So the family contacted Archbishop Brody, contacted the Archdiocese, I should say, and asked, and it's quite beautiful, and said, hey, this is our situation. We believe, and of course, they didn't really need to tell Archbishop Brody what they believe, because Archbishop Brody knows his faith. He knows what they believe. He says, we believe as you on the Eucharist. We may not agree with every dimension of the faith, and we may have differences of opinion on the papacy, but we still respect the Bishop of Rome as a first among equals. I mean, all the things, and we humbly request permission to receive the Eucharist. And it was granted to them. They had the rights to receive the Eucharist, which is technically the Catholic Church's position. In fact, let's say you wind up in, all right, it's in the news now, Ukraine, Russia, which is predominantly Orthodox, though there are parts of West Ukraine which would be strongly Catholic, Ukrainian Catholic. But let's say you're in an area, let's say you're Catholic, but you're on a peacekeeping mission, and there's no Catholic church available for you to go to. Like literally, the only liturgy you can attend is the 9 a.m. liturgy at St. Seraphim's Orthodox Church. Well, first off, you could go there to fulfill your obligation. Secondly, you would be allowed to receive the Eucharist from the Catholic Church would say, you as a Catholic in this situation could receive the Eucharist provided you got permission. We as Catholics would ask our Catholics, don't just go to an Orthodox church and receive the Eucharist. In that case, respect their authority and ask them, hey, I'm Catholic. Here's my situation. May I present myself? Some of the Orthodox churches would say, not on your life, and that's sad. But some would say, you may. Just like we do, right? Just like we do. So the issue, and again, because on one hand, I'm sounding very complimentary toward the Orthodox, and I do believe that, but now I'm going to say something that's a little rough on the Orthodox. We show them a heck of a lot more grace than they show us. Would you say that's fair? I mean, there are some of them that will rebaptize Catholics, which is a load of bunk, okay? If you're an Orthodox and you rebaptize Catholics, then you're being foolish, okay? Let me just say that, all right? So, I would ask them to answer your question, I would say, okay, when Jesus said, you are Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, what did he mean by that then? I would just ask simply. Now, I agree with some Orthodox, as does Pope Benedict, as did John Paul II, okay? There are parts of what that means that we recognize that you could be a good Catholic and not accept, okay? You don't have to accept, as George Weigel points out, the claims that were made of the papal states. You don't have to accept the papal states. Like, you don't have to be like, well, the papal states are, that's it. Well, we don't have the papal states anymore. We have one little state called the Vatican. Okay. There are things about the papacy that Pope Benedict said that if we just go back to 1054 AD, would that be enough? And there has not been, the Orthodox were going to get together for the first time since 787. Remember this a couple of years ago? They were going to have a pan-Orthodox synod. All of the Orthodox leaders from Constantinople, Moscow, Serbia, Hungary, they were going to get together, and I think they were going to get together in Crete, like literally, like the Bible Crete, like, okay, like they were going to get together in the Mediterranean, and they were going to have the first worldwide synod of Orthodox bishops. And guess what happened? They had to cancel the meeting. You know why? Because they couldn't agree on who would lead it. Moscow said, no, we lead it. Constantinople said, no, we lead it. Serbia, this is the funniest part. Serbia comes in and says, no, we lead it. And everybody just laughed at that. They're like, what? Really? You? Moscow was claiming it because we're the big guy. We're the big ones, so we should lead it. Constantinople was claiming it because they were saying, we're the mother church of Orthodoxy. Now, of all of those, the one that had the most legitimate claim would be Constantinople. But they couldn't get together because they were fighting with who was going to be the leader of the movement.
Ethnicities kind of overshadow the unity of the faith, of this dispersed unity of the faith, because their ethnicities are so important to them.
Right.
I think it's really because the conflicts have gone through the years so deep between those ethnicities.
Yes.
That they can't find it hard to bury the hatchet, so to speak.
Right.
And come together.
Right.
Because the bad blood runs deep, so to speak. That's how
Right, exactly.
The churches are very ethnic.
Yes.
And Greeks like to be identified as Greek and not with Russian, and Russian like to go, Russia's the big boy in the block, they love to be. They don't want to be necessarily associated with, as you said, the Croats or the Serbians.
Right.
They don't want to be associated with them.
Right.
They heal them, but they don't want them.
Right. Yeah. Right. Exactly. Yes. Oh. That's very. I think very spot on. There's a sense in which, as Christians, and even as Catholics, we have to admit to some extent this is true. We have often lived as a dysfunctional family. Archbishop Sheen made a comment once that there's millions and millions and millions of people who hate the Catholic Church for what they think she teaches, but there's hardly a person who would really hate the Catholic Church for what she actually teaches. But as you were saying earlier, whose fault is that? Why do so many Catholics believe that we as Catholics don't believe in a personal relationship with Jesus? Where did that come from? Why do so many Catholics only believe, as even Bishop Barron has had to admit, 25 to 30% of Catholics believe that the Eucharist is really Jesus's body and blood? How that happened? Why did that happen? Why do so many Catholics not accept the Church's teaching on pick the doctrine, right? Well, in many cases, we've probably provided a very poor witness, both as lay Catholics, yes, but really many of our bishops have failed to actually affirm clearly the teaching of the Church. And it confuses people. When a pro-abortion person says X, Y, and Z about abortion, and when you have people who claim without batting an eye that they're Catholic, and who are you to tell me I'm not Catholic? And we can't even at least agree to say to tell that person, hey, look, don't present yourself for Holy Communion because there's a problem here. Like, we can't even bring ourselves to say that. Then are we shocked when people are like, well, obviously you don't take, listen to me. I work for a major, I would argue what's the best in the market. I work for a company that was started in Brooklyn, New York, okay? And now has its headquarters in Sarasota, Florida. It's a line of deli meats, okay? You can go to a certain supermarket in town that's green, and you could see 18-foot of case, okay? And I used to work for that company because in the deli business, we owned a family deli, and then our friends had a distributorship, and I got hired. And I was their cop. My job was to go into stores like a Publix, a Winn-Dixie, a Walmart, all right, and look at the product, right? Except in this case, you can't get this product just in any store. You can't. You could probably, if you know the deli meat industry, you could probably guess what product I'm talking about, okay? I worked for that company, and let me tell you something. They took more seriously their brand and their identity than, I hate to say, many parts of the Catholic Church take concerning what we believe most dear. And that's sad. That's sad. You know, when you have the bishops, we just did a radio interview the other day, and I don't even know what to say about this. And I know Archbishop Brody, he agrees with me as well. Agrees with what I'm about to say. The German bishops have just recently come out and said that marriage is not merely between a man and a woman. The German bishops, cardinals in, you saw it. It's not a made up, it's not an article on EWTN, Raymond O'Roy. They love to play that all the time. Oh, that was taken out of context. No, it wasn't. Here it is. Here's the speech. The lead relator general for the upcoming synod said, quote, the church has to recognize that the times have changed and has to recognize that relationships are more encompassing than just a traditional male-female relationship. And we should acknowledge the legitimacy of sexual intimacy between same-sex and trans couples. This is a cardinal. And he's still a cardinal. And then we wonder why people scratch their head and say, okay, what's that thing about the nuptial meaning of the body? You can't read, and this is where it's crazy, right? You can't read the Catechism. You can't read John Paul II. You've heard of theology of the body. You cannot read theology of the body and read what that cardinal said and said these people believe the same things. You can't. So what do? And it confuses people. And it leads to, I think, honestly, to the dysfunction. Don't you think it leads to some of the dysfunction?
It's the big elephant in the room.
Yeah.
That and homosexuality was in the seminaries away. Some of the seminaries have been
Right.
years with exclusivity of homosexuals.
Right.
It's sad. But I blame the Vatican. The Vatican is the one that does not come out strong enough about
Right.
it. They need to take a statement. I mean, he is our leader. It comes from the Vatican. They are complicit. Sometimes they're complicit or they're silent.
Right. And where it's confusing to people is 2 years ago, well, maybe actually 3 years now, and I can't remember what dicastery it was. I think it might have been the Department of Education within the Vatican. But there was a document written about what it means to be man and woman, what it means to be God's image. And it's absolutely amazing. It's incredible. And it was presented, and actually at the end of the document, it says, presented on this day, in the presence of Pope Francis on such and such day. In other words, meaning Pope Francis has given us, as the castery, can I say that, permission to publish this under his magisterium. And you read that and you go, this is great stuff. It's talking about gender is real. Men are men and women are women, and here's why. And this is a nuptial meaning in the Bible, and the Bible begins with a marriage and it ends with a marriage. You would think Scott Hahn may have had a hand in writing the thing. And then you got the leader of the upcoming synod saying that the church's teaching is antiquated. And because of that teaching, we're losing people. No, Your Eminence, I would think the fact that you're not really a faithful shepherd is why we're losing people. So it does creates a real problem for us in the church, because I think a lot of people, as St. Paul says, we're tossed back and forth. You know that passage where he says we're tossed back and forth in Ephesians. We're tossed back and forth on every wind of doctrine, Ephesians chapter 4. And we can't be that way. We have to know what the faith is. Right.
A spiritual work of mercy. Just think of the spiritual works of mercy.
Right.
We are to admonish the sinners.
Right.
Educate the ignorant.
Right. Instruct the ignorant. Right.
Counsel the doubtful.
Right.
So it's not judgmental to call sin out.
Right.
If you do it in the biblical sense, where you're calling a brother or a sister out for their sin to help them,
right,
to save their mortal soul, from separation from God for eternity. Right. That's not judgment.
Right.
It's a work of mercy. According to the Catholic Church, and that has not been done with respect to this gay, homosexual, pedophilia problem,
right,
in particular.
Right.
But there's other things too. But in particular, for some reason, they're afraid of it. I don't know why.
Right. Right. There's a lack of willingness or desire to present the beauty of the teaching, and that's what I think people miss out on. Is I find the church's teaching beautiful. I don't find it. It doesn't mean it's easy.
It's liberating.
But it's liberating. Father Montaron's talk yesterday was beautiful,
Forgiveness.
But demanding. Father Montaron talked yesterday about forgiveness and the cost of forgiveness and how justice and mercy go together. But justice and vengeance and revenge don't. And everything he said was beautiful, powerful, moving, and everything he said was challenging and demanding. They're not opposites. They can go together, right? You had your hand. Okay. Right.
I would have to say culture, because in New York, New Jersey, about 60-70% of people claim Catholic. How can you claim you're being Catholic if you're not going to church every single day?
Right.
If you're just telling your kids to go and get baptized and go through the motions and then kind of just drop off.
There you go.
That's what I'm saying.
And a lot of times that's what happens up there, not to pick on the North, but any chance I get. I was talking to Father Montaron yesterday after, and he was asking me about, New York, because, my brother's a priest up there, and what Catholicism is like up there. And when I gave him some of the numbers, half the priests in the Archdiocese of New York are like 70 and above. The average age of the priest in New York is like 68. In 5 years, they're going to lose 30% of their priests to retirement. They're ordaining on average about 1 to 2 men a year. A diocese of 2.4 million Catholics. Boston's the same situation. In the last 15 years, Boston has closed about 30% of its parishes. All right. They still can't, they need to do more. Pittsburgh just announced that they're, closing like 15%. Cincinnati just announced that they're closing like 40%. They're consolidating parishes. That's the tragedy, right?
Yeah.
That's the tragedy.
We lost 13. What's going on?
Yeah, it's hard. It's really hard, And I keep the one thing though I got to say, and if I was ever anybody in the church, if I was ever important, there's one place I'd go, and I would sit there for 6 months, and I would shadow them. I wouldn't say a word. I would only ask questions. I wouldn't pretend to teach them a thing. The Diocese of Wichita in Kansas. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. They have averaged, just in the last 5 years alone, they've ordained 37 men to the priesthood. They currently have 28 men in the seminary, but that's only because a lot of the guys have gotten ordained recently. They have 12 24/7 adoration chapels in their diocese. If you want your kid to go to a Catholic school in the Diocese of Wichita, you pay $0.0. There's only one catch. Give us 5% of your income. And they've been doing this for 40 years. And guess what? They don't have fundraisers. They don't have bingo sales. They don't try to make money on fish fries or anything like that. They actually are fools. They believe God actually will bless them if they give generously of their time, talent, and treasure. And because God is God, he'll never be outgiven. They have been so blessed. They have 110,000 Catholics in their diocese. So it's not like they have millions of Catholics. They're so big. No, it's Wichita, Kansas. They are slightly under double our size. We're about 65,000 Catholics. But they would be considered on the small to mid-level size. We're on the small size. They're on the small to mid. They have about 75 parishes. About 15 parishes, or 20% of their parishes, have one priest, and that includes a couple of parishes where there's only one priest. Now, there's a good reason for that. Those parishes are outliers. They're out in the country. And if Wichita has a lot of country. So they will have very small parishes. So about 15% of those parishes have one priest. About 55% of their parishes have two priests. 30% of their parishes have three. You realize what St. Michael's in Auburn's trying to do with two priests? They have a huge parish that has about a $1.4 million a year budget that is growing by leaps and bounds. And that's not including the university, which from the latest audit done by Monsignor Farmer, about 25,000 people, this is not St. Michael's in Auburn, but the university itself as its own thing is about 25,000 people. Of that number, 4,000 are Catholic, which is massive because the state of Alabama is about 3% Catholic, which means that the Auburn community, the university community, is 16% Catholic, which is 5 times larger than the number of Catholics in the state. Because why? You have kids coming from Pennsylvania, Wyoming, New York, and they're going to university and they're majoring in engineering and all that. And so many of them are Catholic. And we're trying to deal with that with 2 priests. Could you imagine if we had 3 priests up there? And 1 priest was only for the university. You realize how dangerously good Monsignor Farmer would be with that? So when I say that, Wichita is in that situation. Wichita, because, and I believe this, I believe because they have been so generous to the Lord in time, talent, and treasure, what they do is the two major universities, Kansas State and University of Kansas, they are not part of the diocese. But guess what Wichita does? They still send priests there. They loan the priest to Salinas and Kansas City because the Diocese of Wichita says we've got students there from our diocese. We want to make sure that they have a vibrant campus ministry. And guess what? Their seminary has been filled for 30 years. And no one follows what they're doing. I don't get it. If you mention to somebody from New York, you know what New York will tell you? Oh, we're too big. That's easier in Wichita. And then if you talk to people who are smaller, about the size of Wichita, they're like, well, Wichita's big. They're bigger than us. They got more than we do. It's Wichita, Kansas. I don't mean that. I mean that very complimentary. But it's not like it's Los Angeles and everybody wants to live there because of no. It's the New York Yankees and everybody wants. It's Alabama and everybody wants to play at the, legendary University of Alabama. No, none of this. It's Wichita. It's just people who, in many cases, have farms and they live simple lives and they're fools for Christ. And I don't understand, why more of us are not, at least in church leadership, are not going, look, we need to listen to you. You need to kind of be teaching. Same thing with Lincoln, Nebraska. Lincoln, Nebraska for 30 years has averaged about 4 ordinations a year. Lincoln, Nebraska's diocese is 50,000 Catholics. So that means for about 30 years, Lincoln, Nebraska has averaged 1 ordination for every 12,000 Catholics.
So would Archbishop Roby send somebody over there to look at the seminary to maybe benchmark off of what they're doing right, or is it just the people there, the salt leader people there versus?
He doesn't want them.
I don't know. I don't know what prevents us from, as a church, but I really do think that we need to say, look, I actually called Father Chad Arnold, who's their vocations director, about 3 years ago, and I had it was about a 20-minute conversation. Guy was probably like, who is this nut calling me out of the blue? But he was very generous. And I said, hey, listen, I just read about you all in the National Catholic Register. And I had to call you and just say, thank you for your service, for your love, for what you all have done. And we did bring up that, I do wonder about, like why more of us aren't following what you're doing. And one of the things that Father Chad said to me was that no place, I don't care where it is, doesn't have what we already have. In other words, everybody can do what we're doing because the one responsible is the Lord. And I think a lot of the success in Wichita is exactly what Paul says. He's a fool for Christ. Like, these people actually foolishly believe that somehow, some way, by them putting $5 in the collection basket or committing to tithe and committing to raise their kids in the faith, that somehow God will work. And I think far too many of us, I think it's why Mother Angelica succeeded with EWTN, whereas the Bishops' Conference, who at the same time was trying to do their own radio station, fell flat on their face. The Bishops' Conference, we have a cost-benefit analysis of the radio demographics, and Mother Angelica foolishly said, hey, I want one of those, when she saw a satellite. And said, Lord, use me, And I love what Mother said in the book that she did with Raymond Arroyo. Raymond asked her, so Mother, why did God use you? Why this little Italian nun from Canton, Ohio, in the middle of Alabama, like cloistered. This is hysterical. And she said, because God knew that I was foolish enough to think that I could do it. And I think far too many of our bishops want to be refined. They want to be sophisticated. It's why we don't talk about the devil. Because that's impolite. We may believe in the devil. We may send a priest out to do an exorcism. But, oh dear God, let's never talk about that in mixed company. And Father Alex Crow, who recently did his dissertation on the demonic in the ministry of Jesus. And he came to the conclusion of far too many within leadership don't really believe the enemy is real. And so when Pope Paul VI says the smoke of Satan has entered the church, Der Spiegel and Le Monde, two of the largest European dailies, made fun of him. Because a pope, a man of letters like this, who speaks multiple languages, who's been a diplomat on the world stage, invoking the devil? But why? Why could they say that? Because when was the last time that they heard of the devil in their homilies? When they were back in their churches in Germany and France. And here's what's crazy. How could you live through the aftermath of World War I and World War II and not believe in the devil? But somehow we managed that. And so that's my prayer. My prayer is for us to recognize. I know we started about the Our Father, but this actually became, I think, something that we, maybe we should ask. I sent Father Montron email on Wichita because we were talking about that. And he said, wow, he goes, can you send me some stuff? So I did. I sent him their vocations numbers. I sent him their tithing, their stewardship program. And when I tell you that if you have five kids and you go to St. Philomena's Parish in Wichita, Kansas, and you want your kids to go to school there, and it doesn't matter if it's elementary or high school, when I tell you you pay $0.00, I'm not exaggerating. You don't pay a single penny, and they don't lose money. And you know what? Here's the thing. They don't do it on the back of me as a teacher. I get paid. I get paid a living wage for Wichita, Kansas. See, far too many will say, which is what we did. We artificially kept the cost low with the nuns, which was the worst thing we could have done, right? So we artificially kept it low. Catholics got used to not paying, which was not good because they weren't also giving in the basket. So what happened was when that exploded, when the leaving of the convent exploded in the 60s and 70s, have you ever looked at the tuitions of Catholic schools up in New York? And you need like a second mortgage. There are Catholic schools in Washington, D.C. area are minimum 20 grand a year. Right. In Atlanta, right next door to us, the cheapest Catholic school in the Archdiocese of Atlanta is $16,000 a year. That's the cheapest one.
I think when I sent my son and my other one was at Auburn, I think Catholic tuition was more than the tuition at Auburn.
Right. And that becomes a problem. So I just now, thankfully, what we've done at Catholic now is if you have more than 3 kids in the school, let's say you have 4 kids, 5 kids, you only pay for 3. And with each kid that you get in there, you lower the tuition. Like it's like 10%, 20%, 30% to limit the cost. But a perfect world would be you don't pay for any of it because it's invested. You're investing in it, and it's coming from the parish. It's coming from the church. And guess what? And this is what people have to understand. I know that there are cases where obviously, and Father Victor's being the most obvious one, where there are people who have not gone to a Catholic school. But do you know, even still to this day, that if every 100 priests that we have, 90 went to Catholic schools. And that's even to this day now, where we've been closing Catholic schools, the rise of Catholic homeschooling. It's still overwhelmingly the case where if you graduated a Catholic school, you are like some ridiculous number. It's like you're 76 times more likely to be practicing your faith when you're 50. And guess what? I'll be the first to admit, a lot of Catholic schools haven't been very good. But it goes to show you the power of God's grace, doesn't it? Just doing the rituals has a really, really powerful effect on people. Like talking to Liz, Patrick, I don't think it's an accident that he's the sacristan here. You know how many times I would call Liz when after Patrick got his driver's license, I would always get phone calls from St. Peter's or Holy Spirit or St. Bede's. Listen, we had a funeral today, and we don't have a server. Okay, Patrick, would you serve Mass today? All right. Okay, I'll call Mom. Liz, yeah. And she knew when I called. And I would ask her. I would do it a dozen times a year. You don't think that affects Patrick Gregorius? You don't think Patrick Gregorius remembers when he was 16, 17 years of age that he would leave school 10 to 12 times a year to go drive to St. Peter's because he'd be the main server for the funeral? Of course it does. Even if we taught him nothing in class, even if I went in there and said, okay, today's religion classes, we're going to color pictures of Jesus, which I can assure you we don't do. But that's going to form Patrick. So that's my prayer, is that more of us recognize that we don't have a disadvantage over Wichita. We have everything that they need. I love Bishop Barron and the work that he's done. I love what Scott Hahn's done with his work, But one of the things I wish we did more of, I love the Augustine Institute. They do great work. But I wish we invested more in allowing people to send their kids to Catholic schools. Because as wonderful as it is to do CCD, the idea that I'm going to give you 15 hours of catechesis over the course of 30 weeks, compared to being in a Catholic school, it's not even comparable. Having him, he's on our campus every day. He's at major moments in their life. He's in the locker room at a football game. He's you can't put a premium on that. And I think that becomes very important. I think that's the secret to Wichita, is they've had so many kids in their Catholic schools that it's not a surprise that over the last 5 years they're ordaining an average of 8 men a year.
Point of Mercy, a while back, I don't know what they're doing now, is school
Closed, yeah.
If you had 8 kids, you paid for one.
Right.
Everybody went to
Right. Oh, I remember those days. But it wasn't big enough to sustain it. It has to be, if everybody in our diocese was in on it, we could do it tomorrow.
Whose idea was it to do this? Your sign, in the sense of
You're going to laugh when I tell you. The rumor is it was a priest from Mobile. It was his idea. And this guy in Wichita found it. Ain't that true? Well, yeah. Well, more of them. Father Patrick's going to become a bishop someday, and he's going to implement it. So, all right, I got to go to Mass. We got to go to Mass. Father Patrick, would you close us with prayer? You're in here.